watching Fox 35 News Plus, streaming on Fox Local.
Hi, I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for watching Fox 35 News Plus as we speak with the candidates for Florida governor. And I'm pleased to be joined today by former House Speaker Paul Renner, joining us in our streaming studio here. Speaker Renner, good to see you.
Great to see you.
So I first want to start and just to get your reaction, because what is a pretty crowded Republican primary has now gotten more crowded. We're speaking today, the day after the lieutenant governor decided to throw his name in the ring as well. Your reaction to hearing his official announcement of candidacy?
Well, I think there's a dozen or so, but I think voters are going to want somebody for a huge leadership role like Governor of Florida with leadership experience. And so like Jay Collins, I'm a veteran, served 20 years in 2 wars, but also am the only prosecutor in the race. I was a prosecutor in Broward County, protecting our communities and keeping them safe. And then as Speaker of the House in 2 of the most consequential years we've had in Florida history, certainly a lot of conservative legislation, but also a lot of legislation to help bring down insurance costs and things that people really are concerned about right now. And so that leadership experience and results are what people want. They want less talk and more action from their leaders. And when you look at the resume and people make a fair comparison, that's why we believe we're going to win this race.
Before we get into some of these policy topics, how's the campaign trail been going? Have you been traveling across the state? Where have you been? Just catch us up on kind of what you've been doing on the campaign trail.
Sure. We'll be in all 67 counties. We've been in big counties like Miami-Dade. We've been in small counties like Lafayette County. And we'll be in all 67 before the campaign's over. And the response has been phenomenal. Again, people want a leader. I helped to build the free state of Florida, obviously with Governor DeSantis and my colleagues in the House and Senate during that period of time that I was Speaker, 2022 to 2024. And the Speaker is really like your head football coach who, helps set the agenda of what bills move and don't move, obviously in consultation with the Senate because they've got to go along, overseeing 500 or so employees there in the House. And so next to the governor, it's the most significant role in state government. And so I've done that. And so if people want a leader who can help build on what we have in the free state of Florida, they'd go to someone who helped build it to solve the problems that we have in the future.
Is that what you think kind of differentiates yourself as we do see more candidates entering this Republican race, that kind of leadership role on the legislative side? Do you think that's something that could help on the executive side?
100%. I mean, you know how the legislature functions as a former Speaker of the House, but I've been in leadership roles and more of that management executive officer role in the military. I've led reserve units and I've been a division officer and supervised men during wartime, not once but twice, men and women in the second case in Afghanistan. And so I've got leadership under pressure, positions of trust since I was age 23 on the deck of the USS McInerney, navigating through mine-infested waters all the way through 20 years later in Afghanistan. And of course, as a prosecutor going up against habitual and violent habitual offenders. This is not for the weak of heart. And I had a victim that was dependent on me to convince that jury by unanimous vote to put them away so they would not create another victim. I did that. And so I don't think you can look at any of these other candidates, including the current frontrunner, Congressman Donalds, and not see that huge differentiation from the leadership experience standpoint, but also what do we do in office? I mean, some politicians go into office and they're all about themselves. They're on TV, but they're not actually governing. They're not actually doing anything to solve problems. So I see, if you look at my record compared to all the others, I've got a record, and it's a strong record. Again, if you like the free state of Florida, what we built here, you'll like me as governor.
Well, let's talk a little policy here. Affordability. Huge issue. We see that in poll after poll. I know that has been something that you talk a lot about on the campaign trail and have created a plan to address that. Before we get into that, I do want to get into some of the specifics of your plan and the different points. But how did we get here to where we are dealing with these high costs in so many different ways here in the state of Florida?
Well, I would point to Washington, D.C. and the irresponsible spending, and that's a bipartisan comment. I'm a Republican, obviously, but I think Republicans have been grossly irresponsible in D.C., have failed in their job. We balanced our budget here in Florida. When I was Speaker, we not only did balance a budget, we had record tax relief, but also paid down our debt, a little bit of state debt we have early. In contrast with the federal government, they can't pass a balanced budget and they just keep printing and spending money. That caused inflation. And so what we have here, to state it simply, is inflation and the prices of things have gone up much faster than incomes can afford. And that's true of property taxes, that's true of insurance, and it's true of things like grocery bills, which I can't affect as governor necessarily until the federal government and the people up there, the congressmen and senators, stop spending so much money, wasting money, frankly. And so, but we do have a plan for property taxes. We have a plan for insurance. I can lower those costs. I've done it when I was Speaker of the House in the case of insurance, and I will do it again when I'm governor.
Let's talk about that a little bit, starting with property taxes, because we know that's something that people are watching closely as this current legislative session gets underway. What would be your plan as governor, and what are the things that you want to see with property taxes specifically?
Well, and again, specifically, property taxes have gone up twice as fast as people's incomes over the last 5 years, and over 50% just since 2020. And so that fact is just there, and that means that the same amount of services, roughly a little bit more because of the population growth, that the county and local governments have gotten quite a lot more money. They can afford to roll back to an earlier period of time. So my first step is the rollback. We call it the Renner rollback, which is the one thing you can do legislatively. The idea of eliminating homestead property taxes, increasing exemptions, has to go on the ballot in November. You have to get 60%. There's no evidence that the legislature and the governor have yet to come onto the same page. The legislature's got multiple different plans, none of which is what the governor wants. They have to first agree, and if they agree, it's got to get to 60%. What we can do right now, it can be done in 2 days, is roll back property taxes for everyone, not just homestead, but businesses, renters, people that are non-homestead property payers, back to 2024. That would give everyone a material tax cut. It would be manageable for the local governments. We don't have to worry about cutting the salaries of police or teachers or anything else like that while we look at these broader reforms. So it's not an either or, it's the first necessary steps. Several weeks ago, I called for a special session. The legislature has done nothing. It's been crickets, and so they need to act. They can act early in the session. It starts today, and go right in a couple of days. I've been there. I know how this can be done. It's a short bill to roll back property taxes to 2024. Want to know how much you save? Pull out your bill. And then have the larger conversation. Do we want to get rid of homestead property taxes? Do we want to do something in between where we raise exemptions or take care of seniors on fixed incomes? That's the first necessary step, is this rollback, because while we've been talking about taxes went up in 2025. And guess what? They just went up again in 2026. And so this rollback will roll all of that back, remove the tax increases, give everyone a tax break while we have the larger discussion about, do we want to get rid of all of these taxes for homestead property?
You mentioned the impact on local governments, and that is one of the things that we see concerns about, even among regular folks across the state who are concerned about what the impact might be on their local government and the services that they rely on. So how do you kind of balance that and assure some of those concerns as this process moves forward?
Well, as we look beyond the rollback to the larger reforms for property taxes, my plan would require the cities, rather the counties, who fund our local sheriffs, for example, and of course the city, to fund the budgets of law enforcement first out of the budget. So that would have to come off the top first. They would have to certify that law enforcement, first responders are funded first before they do the things that DOJ has identified, for example, that I would argue as wasteful spending. And so that's where the approach we need is, because government's first priority is public safety. And so we have to recognize that. Government has to do that really, really well. So we are not going to cut cops our sheriff's budgets. In doing this, we have to find a way to cover those essential services and get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse that we know is there. It's even there in the state government. We need to be doging the state government as well.
You talk about insurance. What are some things that a Renner administration would do to address the costs of that? What reforms do you think are needed?
Well, you got a lot of, we call them campaign conservatives, but few true believers, people that have actually, there's one thing to have rhetoric, there's another thing to have done something while you're in office. I've done something on the issue of insurance. When I became Speaker in 2022, we all remember, because the people were going out of business, insurers were going out of business, our bills were double-digit increases each and every year. So we stepped in, got rid of some of the Wild West litigation abuse, both for property insurance as well as auto. And we see huge progress in auto. Some companies now, as of January 1, are down as much as 20%, 15-20% on auto rates. We're the only state in the country where automobile insurance rates are going down. And that's because of reforms that I championed along with my colleagues in the House and Senate. But again, as the head football coach, I was involved deeply with the staff in making sure that that bill moved forward. It was something people said could not be done, and we got it done. And so if you want somebody who's going to bring insurance down further, and I have a plan to do that, I'm the guy, because I've already taken a big stab at it. We're not there yet. We need to make further progress, certainly on property insurance, but we're making huge progress on auto insurance, and you'll see those benefits play out in the coming years.
What about healthcare costs? I know this is something you've talked about and got a part of your affordability plan as well. What can the state do? What role should the state play when it comes to affordability and the access to healthcare?
Well, in first place, I would like to see Obamacare repealed and brought back to the states, but that's a larger conversation. You've got to get Congress to get on board with that. That's more of a long-term thing. But in the short term, there's things we can do with transparency, price transparency. If you have a back surgery or a knee surgery, the difference in price may depend on where you pull up in your parking lot, even though you're getting the same type of care. So there's this wide disparity in what is the cost are in healthcare. By giving patients price transparency, giving them some incentive, like, hey, if you save money with an equal quality, you can put some of that money in your pocket or reduce your premiums or your deductibles. That's a smart way to go. I also want to see, from an affordability standpoint, no surprise billing. I don't want to see, on the bill like, oh yeah, we assessed this $500, hospital fee that you weren't expecting. For a lot of people that are on a very, very tight budget, that's just too much. You need to know going in what you're paying for as best as possible, and not, months after the fact when you get that very confusing thing that explains what your insurer paid, your responsibility, what you still paid. It's very confusing. We need to demystify that and make sure we put patients in control of healthcare, and that will reduce cost.
I want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about immigration. We know over this past year, especially Florida has played a large role, not just at the state, but kind of in the national conversation when it comes to illegal immigration enforcement. And I'm curious what that kind of immigration enforcement would look like under Governor Paul Renner.
It would be equally robust. I think you look at what Governor DeSantis has done, which I think has been exceptional on this front, and it would be the same. I mean, we would lean in and we look for new ways that we can be helpful, because look, illegal immigration, you're bringing in people who are human traffickers. We're going to be talking about that very soon to stop the trafficking of anyone, but especially children. This is a huge issue because of illegal immigration. Fentanyl, other drugs that are being brought across the border. Frankly, people from China and Iran that aren't very close to the border that are coming across, were coming across the border, that could potentially be used as sleeper cells to kill Americans. It's a very, very serious issue. We need to get these people out, first prioritizing those criminals and getting them out as soon as possible, yesterday if possible. And you see these protests, you see people opposing the Department of Homeland Security doing their jobs to enforce immigration, and I won't stand for it. As a former prosecutor, we're going to enforce the law. We're going to protect our law enforcement officials, both state and federal, to do their job.
H-1B visas. I know there's been some talk about that. What would you like to see happen with those?
I've seen too much fraud, too much abuse of it. I think I would I can't do this as a governor, but my recommendation to the federal government is put a complete pause on H-1B visas, because we hear these stories of, and my travel aide who's 23, just graduated from University of Florida. He talks all the time about how the fact that these kids from a very, very good school can't find jobs, and they're being replaced by people from overseas on these H-1Bs. He even told me a story of a friend of his who has multiple patents, was working at a place, trained these two individuals from overseas, and then they replaced him. They fired him because they could pay them less money under an H-1B. That is not the purpose of an H-1B. And these are people, not graduate even level, but bachelor's level and below. And so we do not need to be undermining American workers and American jobs. I would recommend Congress, and again, I'm not in Congress. One of my opponents is to put a full halt on H-1B visas until we clean up this system and make it what it's supposed to be. But I don't like the way it's working. I would stop it.
You think that's it's something that could help the affordability crisis in Florida?
Absolutely. The key way to fix affordability is higher wages, higher incomes, and having a job first and foremost. And so if you're graduating from a university, a great university like Florida or any other great universities, and you can't find a job, something's gone wrong, either with the universities, or in this case, what we find is that foreign individuals, and look, they're looking for a better life, but they can look for a better life in their own country. I'm concerned about Florida workers and putting Florida first. And for that reason, I think the federal government, and I'm not in Congress, but people in Congress ought to be putting a full stop on that. O-1Bs. I just saw an article the other day that you've got OnlyFans models that are getting O-1B visas. This is crazy. So they're basically porn stars that are coming into the country on a visa. We've got to stop this and put a pause on these legal immigration areas like this that are simply not working. Or you look at the Afghan who was allowed in under this aggressive liberal visa program, led into the country and then murdered a National Guardsman. So immigration should be about adoption into the family. There's people that can come into this country and be helpful, fine, but we should set the terms for that. And in the case of H-1Bs, we need to put a full pause on it. The Congress needs to act, and they failed to do so.
Let's talk education here in Florida. And you mentioned Florida universities, and so we'll start with talking about higher ed. There hasn't been an in-state tuition increase in years. Is that something that you think is feasible to continue and needs to continue for the future to remain bright here?
Well, as part of my Florida First affordability plan on voterenner.com, you can look at the whole thing. We talk about H-1B visas. We also say no increases in in-state tuition while I'm governor, and that's important. It's one of the reasons why we've been 9 years in a row ranked #1 in higher education is because of the low cost for our internal residents. This is a great way to come after affordability. I do not want to see students who are already struggling to compete with these H-1B visas to have a big debt coming out of school and then not have a job, or have a job at a place that they didn't bargain for because that's not what their degree was for. And so we're going to keep in-state tuition right where it is and do other things to make sure education is affordable, like HB1 rather, that I did as speaker, which was making sure that parents and children can go to the school that best fits their needs.
Let's talk now K-12 education and the vouchers that there seems to be growing appetite for among parents, especially here in Central Florida. We've seen the numbers as more students and their families kind of migrate to some of these other schools. We are seeing declining enrollment and difficulties for some of those other schools. How do you ensure adequate funding for some of these schools that all of a sudden find themselves in tough spots because of they're losing students?
Public schools.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you look at the data, and I've looked at it in several counties where the argument has been, that all this is the voucher program is taking all these kids out of the public schools. When you look at the breakdown, and in my county there was 2,000 plus that had left, it was like 120 people were on the scholarship, on the voucher, on the Universal School Choice Scholarship. You have immigration, kids that are no longer going to school in our public schools, and again, that's costly to taxpayers. So that's a good thing, but there's other reasons why people are leaving public schools. The bottom line is, I want all of our schools to be world class. And so on the issue of public schools, I was supportive with the governor of raising teacher salaries. I'll continue to do that as governor. We will continue to help make sure, and I was a public school kid, my mom was a public school teacher. I want every kid at every school to have a world class education, period, full stop. But you also have choice, and competition's good. When the public schools only had an entrance but no exit, it's like the Hotel California. And so school choice has made everybody level up, everybody up their game, and do a better job of teaching kids at a higher level. We want, again, world class, whether it's traditional public, charter, private, homeschool. We want all of those kids to get the very best customized education they possibly can.
Let's talk about healthcare a little bit more in a different way. I know you have come out in favor of removing the state's vaccine mandates. There's a lot of conversation about that. But we also know there's a lot of hesitancy among parents concerned about what that might mean for their kids in schools, and some of the reasons that those requirements were kind of put in place in the first place. So what is your message when it comes to that tightrope, I guess?
Well, I will say Democrats have always said look to nations of Europe for our guidance on things. Look to Denmark, and Denmark has no mandates. Other nations in Europe have no mandates but still have high vaccination rates. This is fundamentally about informed consent. You go in for a procedure, they say here are the costs, here are the benefits. Same thing with vaccines. Now, my kids have been vaccinated for all the things that'll kill you because I believe the benefits outweigh the cost, but that's a choice for the parent to have in consultation with a pediatrician, not the CDC recommending and the Department of Health mandating no matter what. what those vaccines are. And the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is when I grew up, there were 10 or 12 of these things. Now there's like 60 or 70. So there's this explosion, far more vaccines that are recommended and then mandated to parents in this country than the vast majority of other countries. So let's pare that back. Let's look at things that are really serious, like polio and other things like that. But ultimately, I want that parent to make the decision. Not me, but I want the parent to make the decision. We do that in every other aspect of healthcare. A mandate to me means that you're not confident that you can explain the benefits well enough to overcome any potential costs there are from vaccine injuries, which are real. I want to make sure we're documenting those, and we just let science inform parents and pediatricians to make the right decision. You see in Denmark, there's no huge collapse in vaccination rates, but people should have the freedom, the health freedom to make that decision. And I believe in that fundamentally. Our health freedom is about more than that. It's also about alternative medicine and giving people choices in how they pursue their health care. It's about making sure children get great physical education. I want to bring a governor's physical fitness program back into our schools that give kids a play-based childhood. There's too much time on digital platforms. I also want to protect children as part of that health freedom, is protect their health from some of these AI platforms that are destroying them and social media that's destroying them psychologically, and give greater priority to parental rights to control what your children see.
You talk about AI. We know there's a lot of conversation about regulating AI at the state level, but there's pushback from federal level and from big tech, of course. What do you think is the state's role when it comes to regulating AI and implementing some protections or guardrails, specifically when it comes to kids?
We should have one. In part of my health freedom and wellness initiative, you can see I want parental opt-in. I want to make sure parents that AI is not their boyfriend or girlfriend or their mom or dad or their god or their oracle. And you see these kids that wind up, it leads them to suicide or leads them down a very dark psychological path. We need to be very careful because these algorithms are really wrecking our kids' childhood. And I was a champion for the same kind of thing when it comes to social media platforms, those addictive platforms that are causing almost a third of high school women to contemplate suicide in the last year. Online pornography for young 8-year-old, 9-year-old boys principally. I mean, these young kids. This is going to protect our kids. I was a champion for that. So when voters look at, hey, who do I want so we don't take a step backwards with Governor DeSantis, you want somebody who actually showed up and delivered results. I've done that as speaker on this issue. We'll go after AI platforms to make sure that if they're going to be used, they've got to be safe. And I see a lot of things that tell me that they're not safe right now for our kids.
Almost out of time here, but what is your bottom line kind of pitch to voters and what you want them to know about Paul Renner as candidate for governor?
If you do your research and there's a fair comparison between the candidates, you'll want me as your next governor. I helped build the free state of Florida. Again, the leadership background, the experience. We've set forth a vision that other candidates have not. We're very deliberate. I think voters deserve to know this is what I'll do if you elect me. And these kinds of things, as well as I've spent my whole life in service to others, 20 years in the military. You don't get rich doing that. You put your life on the line doing that. As a prosecutor, I can tell you don't get rich being a prosecutor here in the state of Florida, and neither do you or should you as an elected official. Yet some politicians have used politics to enrich themselves and do things for themselves. I'm not that kind of politician. Service is in my core. Growing up as a pastor's kid and a mom who was a school teacher, I believe in this. I love this state. I don't want to see it go backwards. And with me, we're going to move forwards in a very positive way.
Campaign, I'm sure, can be a grind. What is your favorite campaign playlist song right now? What's your go-to there?
Well, I like Toby Keith, a little less talk and a lot more action. It's got a little different context, but that's kind of our motto is people talk in campaigns and you hear a lot of rhetoric and I'm going to make all your wildest dreams come true, but they've never delivered results. They've never shown up when they had the opportunity, or they just don't have the experience and any reason for us to believe that when they show up, they can actually get it done. I've shown up. I've shown that we can get it done, whether it's on educational freedom, health freedom, on reforming our insurance to bring down rates, making sure we balance our budget and return money back to people that deserve it so we can tee up for property tax reform. All of these things I've done as one of the key leaders here in the state here recently, and I'll do it as governor.
All right, we'll wrap up. One more question on a little bit of a lighter note. What's your go-to meal? What's your favorite meal? If you've got a big day the next day, maybe what are you picking? What are you choosing?
I love barbecue, but if it's a big day the next day, I'm probably not going for barbecue. Something a little lighter, maybe some Thai food or something like that. But I am food motivated. I try to keep the weight off, but I do love a good meal, and I don't like to miss them. And so on the campaign trail, sometimes it's drinking a protein shake or something on the road between events. But yeah, we got to keep ourselves healthy. And again, our wellness plan, that's part of it too. Getting all that crap out of our food for our kids and getting those ultra processed foods out and good food in. That makes us all better, living long, healthy lives. And that's what I want for everybody.
Well, former House Speaker Paul Renner, Republican candidate for governor, we appreciate you joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thanks, Garrett.